Even though it's not a weekday and it's just a regular old weekend, you still have some very important news that dropped today, such as Pierre Poilievre did a live stream, did his own press conference, streamed it on his own YouTube channel, where he issued pretty much the final warning or a final threat to Justin Trudeau that even Trudeau himself can't stop what's about to come. And of course, he's referring to the vote of non-confidence that's going to happen tomorrow, which seems like there may actually be a tangible possibility that it goes forward, even without Jagmeet Singh and the NDP's support. For the first time in an extremely long time, you have not only one party putting forward a vote of non-confidence, but you have a second party that supports it, the Bloc Québécois. And so with those two parties, the Conservatives and the Bloc, is there enough to topple the government? The answer is no. No, that's not enough. But keep in mind, you also have people from the Independent that are going to be voting in favor of that, like Independent MP Kevin Fong. So is that enough? No, not really. Now, there are still between 14 and 30, the number is kind of unknown, amount of Liberal MPs that tried to rebel, the Rebel Caucus, right? And then Trudeau had to, pretty much do all these closed door meetings to try and stop everybody from blabbing to the press and blabbing online about how they don't, have any more confidence in Justin Trudeau. So what happens if they vote in favor of a non-confidence? Is that enough to topple the government? The answer is yes, but you don't necessarily need the rebels to vote in favor. You can also have people abstain from voting. You can have NDP MPs or the Liberal rebels abstain from voting, which then could see a bit of a Hail Mary, before Christmas miracle, a Christmas holiday miracle, where we have an actual election that would be scheduled. Now, that wouldn't necessarily happen before Christmas, but you never know how fast these things can really be put together. So this is extremely exciting, and I want you to pay attention to as much of today's video as you possibly can. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the video, everybody. Before we get into it, I do want to encourage you all to smash the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. It does really help grow the channel. And I do have a special message from today's sponsor. I'd like to thank today's sponsor, Private Internet Access. We've teamed up together and we're offering my audience 83% off for using code SUNSHINE, which can be found linked down below in the description or the pinned comment below. It's no surprise that we're living in a time of censorship, and Canada is unfortunately leading that race because of Justin Trudeau. Now, Justin Trudeau wants to make sure that you can't see the news. He wants to make sure that you can't see certain content on streaming platforms like Netflix, Hulu, Crave, and you shouldn't have Disney Plus because, of course, our finance minister said if you can't afford things, you should cancel Disney Plus. So the way around this is through a VPN such as Private Internet Access. Now, for those who don't know what a VPN is, it's a way to encrypt your data, basically putting a cloak over you so that you can freely browse the internet without feeling like your personal information is at risk or the government getting and selling your personal information. And the best way that I like to go about this, the best cloak that I like to put over myself is Private Internet Access, which again can be found linked down below in the description or the pinned comment below for 83% off. Thank you, Private Internet Access, for sponsoring this video. So this video is broken down into two parts. The first part is going to be Pierre Poilievre's speech, and literally his live stream was called, or was just titled, Just Stop. He wants Trudeau to just stop. And then the second half is going to be a sit down with CTV reporter Vashi, who sits down with Trudeau's mistress, Melanie Joly, to talk about just affairs with, America, with Trump and the Arctic, because Canada is starting to put more money, more resources into the Arctic to protect our northern border. So whenever you hear Canadian politicians say from coast to coast to coast, they're talking about the left, the right, the right, the left. I'm reversing it so it makes sense to you on screen. The right, the left coast, and then the northern coast as well. So those are the two parts, but I do hope you stick around for the full thing. And without further ado, let's get right into this video. Starting things off with the Pierre Poilievre live stream.
This time, Chrystia Freeland told you that she would have one by the end of the year, after the Prime Minister's office had told you that one was coming early next week. I actually made an offer to the Prime Minister and Ms. Freeland that I would give up some of Conservative opposition motion time on Monday, tomorrow, to let them introduce their fall update, an unprecedented act of non-partisan generosity I was shocked to see them turn it down. They claimed that they wanted to introduce such a fall update and that it was just those mean Conservatives that were blocking them from doing it. So I cleared the way. 2 hours. They could have introduced it. But they said no. Bizarre. Normally, governments love to introduce fall updates because they are gigantic opportunities to advertise all the good things the government is doing for the finances of the country and the pocketbooks of the people. Well, that is, if you're not doing any good things, then you probably don't want anybody to know about it. And that is, in fact, the case of this government. The reality is that Chrystia Freeland and Justin Trudeau have lost control of the finances. Justin Trudeau is a weak prime minister. He's lost control of the borders, lost control of immigration, lost control of spending, lost control of the debt, lost control of inflation, lost control of housing costs, lost control of crime, lost control of drugs. He's lost control of his own cabinet, with his foreign minister launching her leadership campaign on the front page of the New York Times with a big, beautiful photo shoot that she would have gone into a studio to have done, and a screaming headline describing her as a potential successor. He has totally lost control, and now he doesn't want Canadians to see the disastrous state of our books. Remember, he promised, she promised, the deficit would not exceed $40 billion. And now they won't tell us what the deficit is. There are real consequences for these costly failures. After 9 years of Trudeau, everything costs more, with food prices having risen 37% faster in Canada than they did in the United States during the exact same time period. That gap coincides with the coming into force of the carbon tax on the farmers and truckers who bring us our food, a tax he now wants to quadruple to 61 cents a litre. This is a prime minister who's doubled our housing costs. So now 80% of Canadians believe, for the first time in Canadian history, that home ownership is only for the very rich. Last week, OECD said that Vancouver and Toronto are now by far the most expensive housing markets in North America. We have the highest housing costs and the lowest incomes. Look at comparison. Seattle's housing costs are about 30% lower than Vancouver's, even though Seattle workers make far more money than Vancouverites make. Housing costs in Toronto are significantly higher than Chicago, even though Chicago workers make more than Torontonians. The two worst housing costs. How is it possible that we have 10 times as much land per capita as the Americans, that our housing costs more than theirs? Well, that's because of 9 years of Justin Trudeau's out-of-control inflationary money printing and immigration, and his financing of local bureaucracies that block home building. And not only do we have expensive homes, we have more homeless people. 38% more chronic homelessness. 1,400 homeless encampments in Ontario after 9 years of Trudeau and the NDP Liberals. 35 homeless encampments in Halifax after 9 years of Trudeau and the NDP Liberals. 2 million people line up at food banks. A quarter of our kids are going to school hungry, and a quarter of parents are skipping meals so their kids don't have to. Those same parents toss and turn at night because they are the most indebted households in the G7. By far, it's not even close. And then our own debt, our national debt, has doubled. Trudeau and the NDP Liberals have added more debt than all prior prime ministers combined. And now they won't even tell us how big the debt or the deficit is. Crime, chaos, drugs, and disorder now spill into our once safe streets, with rampant repeat offenders out killing, maiming, raping, and decimating our communities, our once safe and tranquil communities. Hate crimes are up 256%, with church burnings, fire bombings of synagogues, and attacks on other places of worship now out of control. With all this damage, with everything that Justin Trudeau and the NDP Liberals have done to make life more costly and dangerous, it would be unrealistic for me to ask them to improve the situation in their upcoming fall economic update. So I have a more realistic request. Actually, it's more of a plea. Stop. Just stop. Stop adding inflationary spending that balloons the cost of living. Stop your carbon tax hikes. Stop taxing home purchases. Stop adding dangerous and irresponsible debt that threatens our social programs. Everything you're doing, Justin Trudeau, just stop doing it in this fall update until common sense conservatives can start fixing everything you broke. There will be a carbon tax election. And in that election, there will be a very simple choice. Either we go ahead with quadrupling the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre, driving hundreds of billions of dollars and millions of jobs to America and driving our people to starvation, or common sense conservatives who will axe the tax. That's why it's a carbon tax election. 61 cent a litre carbon tax with the NDP Liberals, zero carbon tax with the Conservatives. The choice again, an NDP Liberal government who will tax your food, punish your work, double your housing cost, and unleash crime in your community, or common sense Conservatives who will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. Our common sense Conservatives will take the GST off new homes to save you up to 50 grand on a purchase and stimulate an extra 50,000 apartment and housing builds every single year. We will cap spending, cut bureaucracy and waste to fix the budget. We will stop the crime by locking up violent repeat offenders, securing our borders, and banning hard drugs. In essence, we will bring home Canada's promise, a very simple promise, that hard work earns you a powerful paycheck and pension that buys affordable food, gas, and homes in safe neighborhoods in the freest country on earth, Canada. Let's bring it home.
Thank you. We'll now take questions.
He's so good with these speeches. I mean, no, I don't think there's a teleprompter. I don't think that maybe he's got notes in front of him, but to be honest, it feels like this is all off the top of his head, all by memory, all from the heart, more importantly. And this is one of the largest differences, the biggest difference between when it comes to speaking, public speaking, between the next Prime Minister of Canada, the man on the screen, Pierre Poilievre, or Justin Trudeau, right? I mean, that was just phenomenal. 8 minutes of just pure bangers. Let's see what kind of questions reporters ask him now.
Poilievre, JP Tasker from CBC News. In an interview this morning, Donald Trump again floated the idea of Canada becoming the 51st state of the United States. Are you concerned that the president-elect repeatedly brings up this idea of annexing our country?
Well, the bottom line is that Justin Trudeau is a weak leader, and he gains no respect from countries all around the world. Canada should have a strong, smart leader with the brains and backbone to put our country first. And that's what I will do. We will have common sense Conservatives will put Canada first. We will remove the crippling taxes and debt that have weakened our country under Trudeau. We will unleash the production of our resources to make ourselves more economically independent. We will rebuild our military and secure our borders, and we will go into negotiations with our American friends in a position of strength rather than weakness. Canada will be independent, strong, and proud, and our flag, the maple leaf, will fly proudly again over our country. Thank you.
Colton Parrell, CTV. Last night, your MP, Jamil Jivani, posted about a great conversation he had with the U.S. Vice President-elect. Did he advocate against the imposition of U.S. tariffs? And who are you reaching out to in the incoming Trump administration to do the same?
I wasn't at that meeting, so I don't have an answer to that question. I haven't.
Thank you. Next question.
Just on the point with Mr. Mackenzie here from Global News, just on the point about Mr. Jivani's meeting with J.D. Vance, you didn't instruct him at all to bring up the idea of that 25% tariffs are bad. You'd said previously that you'd tell any American that you or conservatives would speak with that they would be a bad idea.
Every single conservative would tell every single American that a tariff on Canada is a bad idea. We need to put Canada first, and that's what we will do. We will fight these tariffs from a position of strength. We will unleash the production of our resources. We will cut taxes on our workers, our businesses, to bring home more production to this country. We will stand shoulder to shoulder with the men and women in uniform by rebuilding our forces, and we will reinforce our border, all of which will put Canada in a position of strength and reverse the weakness that Justin Trudeau has brought to our country after 9 years of weak leadership. So every conservative tells every American that tariffs on our country are a bad idea, and when I'm Prime Minister, we will have a strong Canada First policy in order to fight those tariffs and to fight for Canadians.
Thank you. This will be the final question.
Jim Brodscale, the Canadian Press. Good morning. Do you have any thoughts on the fall of the Assad regime in Syria and anything that Canada could or should do to restore stability to the region?
Well, first of all, Assad was a puppet for the tyrants of Tehran. He has carried out genocides against the Sunni people in his own country. And now he appears to have been toppled. We don't know who will replace him, but I don't think we should get involved in that mess. It's not our fight. We should stand with our allies, including Israel, against the terrorists, and we should focus on protecting our own country. Because after 9 years of Trudeau, we've never been so vulnerable and so at risk. He lost control of our borders, lost control of our spending, lost control of our security, lost control of crime. He's allowed terrorists to come into our country even after they've been videotaped mutilating human beings in other parts of the country and other parts of the world. And what we need now is a strong leader who will put Canada first. My only concern is Canada. We need, for a change, a Prime Minister who will put this country and its people first.
There you go. Wow, that's phenomenal. I mean, that's probably the best way anyone could have actually answered a question about foreign issues. It's not our fight. We shouldn't be focused on that. And to be honest, Canadians in the masses don't give a shit. We don't care about what's happening in other parts of the world unless it has an impact on us, which that does not. We need to focus here on Canadian things. And just like you said, Canada first. I'd love to know what you guys think down below in the comments about that interview or that press conference. Next up, we're going to take a look at an interview of Trudeau's mistress here, which this face sums up everything, where she sits down with Vashi one-on-one to discuss the Arctic and a couple other things. Here we go.
Appreciate you making the time. Russia now operates, I believe, a third more military bases in the Arctic than the U.S. and NATO combined. They have 8 submarines based in the Arctic that can launch long-range nuclear weapons. They've spent the last decade, as you know, building up their military capacity, in the Arctic. How long do you think it will take us to catch up?
I think we have some catch up to do, but I think we're not alone. We're there also with allies, including the Americans and also along with the Nordic 5, which are Sweden, Finland, Norway, Iceland, and Denmark. And now what is happening is we have Finland and Sweden that have joined NATO. So for a long, long time, Vashi, Canada had a position, along with all the Arctic states, the 8 of us, including Russia, that the Arctic needed to be a low-tension region. But what happened is when Russia invaded Ukraine, it decided to invest a lot in this war. And it bit by bit became much more reliant on China. And what we've seen now is in this partnership between China and Russia, Russia is now the junior partner. And it is allowing China to be even more in the Arctic. And you're seeing now military joint operations, Coast Guard operations. And it has been for a long, long time the aim of China to be able to have access to the Arctic and to be able to have access to the Arctic because of climate change. Arctic sea ice is melting, and it's the quickest way between Asia, and therefore China, and Europe. And so we have to reckon that reality. We have to change our perspective on the Arctic, and we need to invest more in defense.
Do you think, though, that the policy you tabled today, which is, my understanding, has about $34.7 million in funding attached to it, $7 million annually thereafter, meets the moment, though, as you describe it from a defense and security perspective?
Well, of course, it's not about defense and investment. You have to read this new Arctic foreign policy as a bedrock for defense policy because, as you know, diplomacy and defense go hand in hand. And so what we did last spring was that the Prime Minister and the Minister of Defense announced a very important defense policy update, investing billions of dollars in NORAD modernization and also in equipment for the Arctic. It was the first time in decades that Canada was saying we will invest even more in defense, but also while investing, we will prioritize the Arctic. And that's exactly what we're doing. And so, of course, you have to see the investments together.
Sure, but I have to challenge you even on that point, because in 2022, the first time that your government promised money for NORAD modernization as it relates to the Arctic, I believe the figure was something like $4.9 billion over 6 years. The bigger figure is $30 billion over the long term. So far, as of June, your government had only spent $70 million of that. How is that meeting the moment?
So I know that these questions would be best answered by the minister in charge of the file, which is the Minister of Defense. But what I can tell you is that we need to invest more in defense. And we know across NATO and across the alliance that we have an issue with the fact that our defense supply chains are not going fast enough. And a lot of the equipment that we're buying and all the resources that, the material resources that we're investing in are made in the US. And so we are having
that's
these
the only problem, though?
It's one of the main problems. It is one that, as an alliance, we're facing. Because also, meanwhile, Russia has changed its economy for a war to a war economy. But at the same time, we indeed need to do more, and we're doing more. So in order for us to have a common understanding of where we should invest, where is Canada's place in the world, what are the best way to protect Canadians on a military front and a security front, we need to have a foreign policy that is clear. And that's what I came up with today.
But you say how it's hand in hand with the defense policy. I've now covered 2 different defense policy updates that your government has provided. The primary criticism has been that you're promising to do things that never come to fruition. The former head of NORAD, just until this year, a retired U.S. General, Glenn Van Herk, upon the news of the stuff that you're highlighting, said, "I look forward to seeing those actions." But there's not a history of Canada taking those actions. Do you think our allies are convinced that your government will actually do what it's saying it will? Because you don't have a history of that.
Well, we have a history, actually, of making sure, as real Canadians, that when we say something, we do it. And at the same time, I think that we need to do more also to create a defense industry here in Canada. And that's what we're doing through the strategy and through also what we announced this summer, which was we will be in charge of producing the best icebreakers in the world. This announcement was made along the US and along Finland because Davie Shipyard in Quebec City, which basically produce icebreakers for Canada, has just bought a Finnish shipyard from what used to be a Russian company, which was sanctioned and therefore prohibited to invest in Finland. And now Davie is looking at investing also in many shipyards in the US. And we know that we have catching up to do. We know that there are more icebreakers that are being built in Russia and China. But this is something that what the Biden administration was looking at. And also this is something that the Trump administration and President-elect Trump himself has raised many times. So I think that we're actually in solution mode. I think we're creating good jobs.
Every investment that they are now doing and announcing that they're doing, they're also saying in the same breath of air, well, we are far behind it. We are far behind it. Yeah, man, you guys have had 9 years to make proper investments. And this is why Chrystia Freeland is holding off on announcing the fall economic budget heading into winter. For crying out loud, we're almost 2025. It's not fall 2024. We're almost in the start of 2025. This is ridiculous. These people are running deficits with their investments into shite programs when they should have been investing in proper things. And now all of a sudden they've had a euphoric moment. That's right. We're gonna invest in the right things, right? Come on, man.
Jobs at home. But I think also we have to do more of that in our country.
How do you, I guess, address, though, the sentiment as it has been expressed publicly from our allies, primarily in the United States, but elsewhere? I spoke to the ambassador, David Cohen, the outgoing ambassador, who said our record on defense spending, and I take your point that the minister is responsible for that, but your portfolios are very intertwined. You know, our laggard spending has impacted our place in the world. Like, how do you convince allies that you're serious about what you're saying today? And do you understand how they might not believe it?
No, I think they do believe it. And I think that we absolutely need to do more on defense. And I've been saying that in all your questions you're asking. And I'm hawkish about that. I really think that the geopolitical reality has changed. We live in a tough world and we have to be tougher in our response. Period. You
mentioned the incoming Trump administration, and I wondered if you had the opportunity since Donald Trump announced his nominee for Secretary of State would be Senator Marco Rubio to speak to Senator Rubio.
So I've been in contact with many U.S. lawmakers, but as you know, confirmation hearings are happening soon, and the Secretary of State is not necessarily engaging with any foreign ministers. But I've been in contact with many senators that know him well, and my goal is definitely to be able to have different conversations with people around him. Of course, you don't want the foreign minister from Canada to be a problem for the confirmation of the new Secretary of State.
Do you have an impression based on those conversations of whether or not we will avoid the application of those tariffs?
I think that when President Trump talks about tariffs, we have to take him extremely seriously. And I think we have to be ready with our own tools. And at the same time, we have to develop our relationships with the incoming administration. And that's exactly why Prime Minister Trudeau went to Mar-a-Lago.
I wanted to ask in that vein, like if a 25% tariff is applied to our imports, which essentially sends our economy immediately into a recession, how eager are you to strike that allyship with the U.S., to foster that allyship? Like, isn't it a direct insult?
Well, see, I've been to Washington recently. I've had many phone calls with many American senators. I think that there is a reckoning that not only are we an important partner, but Canada is the biggest export market for the U.S. Anything they do in terms of their economic policy will have, when it comes to our relationship, will have an impact on them too. And that's why we have a very successful trade partnership. And at the same time, when you look at it, the trade numbers are more than China, the UK, and Japan together. So,
but you've been making that, you and your cabinet colleagues have been making that argument since last January to the people in and around Donald Trump, and you were not able to secure any kind of exemption from the threat of the application of these tariffs. What does that say?
Well, first and foremost, the president will be inaugurated on January 20th. I know that there's lots of concerns across the country, but at the same time, we're doing the work. We had a plan from the get-go because we've been working on different scenarios. We're now implementing that plan. And the plan was to create this U.S.-Canada committee, was to engage rapidly by going to Mar-a-Lago, making sure we were creating good relationships. And my job in that plan was also to work with other countries in the world and to make sure that we would be working with our European allies and our North Pacific allies. And I've been doing that work.
Is anyone going to defend us?
I think that we have very good relationships, and I think that we can definitely work with many countries. But I think that many countries are coming to see us to understand how is Donald Trump, how is his future administration, and just overall U.S. dynamics.
Does that...
This is a weird mentality that the liberals have, where we are the largest exporter to the United States, and so therefore, you know, we have more negotiating power and we can get away with more. I mean, I understand the mentality, but at the end of the day, America is going to be America first, especially under Trump, like more than ever. Canada needs to be Canada first, and having this idea that you can just do whatever you want against Donald Trump because we're the largest exporter, America will just go somewhere else, leaving Canada behind. You can't just pull that card out willy-nilly the way that Melanie Joly is doing it. I understand the mentality of thinking that you could do that, because that kind of makes sense. Like, hey, yeah, we have leverage over America. They can't just tariff us to death because we'll just stop trading with them. I get it, but I don't think that's a good idea. I really don't agree with that. But that's my opinion, and I would absolutely love to know your guys's. That's in the video, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. And just remember that supporting the sponsors of this channel is also a way of supporting this channel. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.